Hi everyone, welcome. As I do sometimes, I'm preparing to go downstairs to my wormery, but making a little pit stop here at my computer first, just to sort of check out the video from the last time I fed the bins that I've got scheduled for today. There are a couple of red wiggler bins. They got a whole bunch of, carrot peels and cucumber peels, little bits of tomato and strawberry in there. All that yummy stuff covered with some worm chow and some coffee. And the food was laid out onto a couple of paper towels. And towards the end, later on, as we were covering up, we had put on our feeding zone indicator, which is usually just a coffee filter, and then just a couple more additional pieces of newspaper top covering. That's two bins set up that way, and they're now, let me bring you over to the tracking spreadsheet so you can see what I'm talking about. They're now getting up there in age. They're the ones that you see here in green, with the older one, 291 days of age. And there's 26 feedings, 20 feedings in the younger one, the 273-day-old bin. Reason for the discrepancy there is because the younger bin was set off for about a month and a half on a time-lapse special mission to eat a cantaloupe in front of the camera. So that's the reason its count on feedings is a little bit down. But I figured since we're only 9 days away from the older one hitting 300 days of age, we would kind of try to squeeze in a feeding. It's kind of timely anyway. It's been 11 days since they were last fed that stuff you saw in the video, so it's probably gone by now. We're going to give them another fairly lightweight, fast composting meal so that in 9 days when we come back here, perhaps we'll find nothing. Perhaps we can even initiate the migration of the worms out of this stuff with a horizontal migration set up. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For now, I just want to get these guys fed, so why don't we head down to the wormery now, and I'll meet you there. Most of what I've got set aside for this feeding is familiar stuff, such as my worm chow and the coffee filters. This here is a little bit unusual though. These are just the peels off of almonds. And I thought I'd take my chances, sprinkle it in with today's feeding. I'm going to kind of keep it in a bunch though, just in case it ends up not being popular and needing to be fished out later. Yeah, that's mold. So some of it's kind of moldy from being in the bag, a lot of it is just dry. So maybe we'll have head to head. One bin will get one, the other bin will get the other, and we'll see which the worms prefer. So let's get to feeding. We're starting here in the older of the two bins. And I don't know why, but I think I might have even made a comment on camera how the second bin somehow seemed further along, despite this one being a little bit older, which is totally possible. Even though you might be trying to keep things in sync between a couple bins, it could be possible that you have things that make results steer one way or another. So this coffee filter's holding out pretty good, but like you saw, we got brand new ones, so I'm thinking maybe these will be some of the last bits of bedding these wormies get. I mean, you might remember in the video when we were screening it earlier to refresh our memory on how things were set up here when we left. There were a lot of places out here for the moisture coming off the plastic bubble wrap coating here to covering to recirculate. And I think by making this newspaper really damp, it made it into something the worms were able to really just gobble up the majority of. And most of what's here is castings. If I shook all the castings off, we'd have a couple little tiny scraps of paper. Virtually nothing. So there's I don't know, with the new coffee filter that we've got to put in here today, maybe we can even do something a little different in terms of covering up on the top at this point just with a couple coffee filters instead of trying to bring in more newspaper to give them a top covering. I'd really like to keep kind of winding this system down and getting it to the point where it'll be ready for harvesting the castings, because as you can see, the castings really don't need a whole lot more. Here and there you see a little piece of something floating around, and I think they can probably do away with what's still in here from what I could see. Most of it looks very tiny. These are what stick out the most somehow in my mind. It'd be really nice just to see no more of these. If there were no more of these, I would have to say it's pretty much done, but I guess we'll give it a little bit more time. It's no rush. So I'm just curious, how did those paper towels that we had included with the feeding last time, did they get gobbled up, or is it possible that we might see leftovers? I mean, I see no sign of the previous feeding really. I mean, there were some avocado shells probably from you know, feeding's gone by already. Whatever this was, whatever's still in here is extremely old. Let's just make sure we haven't failed to go deep enough. I just kind of went right to the bottom now, cutting right through the entire depth of the feeding area, and it's it does seem like it's pretty much mainly castings. Here we go. This is kind of what I thought I'd see. A couple pieces of napkin that were placed in here, a couple layers deep, I think it was. So, well, I don't know. Maybe that will include these over here, because this is just where the little tiny scraps of stuff are collecting. Let's see what else we can spot. A couple little pieces, but certainly not much. That's for sure. Stem of a banana. I was almost thinking at this point I should be doing what I can to see if I can help these sorts of things along. So maybe I'll occasionally try to run my finger through something to kind of make it a little bit more vulnerable to worm traffic, and then perhaps it will actually get completed in short order with my help, but we'll have to see about that. Alright, I love how the feeding area is almost all worms and all castings, and there's just a couple little pieces of this and that, but hardly anything. Corn cobs, I even debated, should I try piecing up those corn cobs, or is it better that they remain whole? Kind of like the idea that they're still whole, so if at some point I still need to fish out some sort of whole uncomposted items, they would be simple enough that way to pull out. And I guess not knowing if they would actually break down anytime soon by being broken up either, I figured I'd just play it safe and maybe let them continue that way for easier extraction later if we decided we wanted to do that. I guess here too, why not? Let's just put a crack in it. I guess that's what I was just concerned about, was like jamming my finger into one of these and having it full of worms. Sorry guys, just thought it would help a little bit. Alright. So, I don't know if we're going to find many more leftovers. Let's just cover the pile of leftovers with this coffee filter here, so we know to come back to it, so that we're reminded of what's there. I just really quick wanted to also check out the whole rest of the system too now. And then when we feed, I don't think I'm going to do the traditional gully down the middle. I thought I'd kind of spread that coffee and worm chow mixture out a little bit more broadly, so that the worms are still going to go for it, but by doing so I won't be driving them to any one spot. They'll still be kind of dispersed and equally scattered throughout the bin, not distracted from continuing with working the rest of the material in here down. Some of it clumps up, as you can see, but it also breaks apart quite easily too. So none of this seems too bad as far as being clumpy or too muddy or anything like that. Here too, I'm just going to give this whole thing a quick till, and you know, I saw something here. Maybe we should do what we can when we see leftovers to keep them all together. I don't know why, it just seems like a good thing in case I at some point decided I wanted to fish them out. It'd be nice to know that the majority of them are where I left them. Man, yeah, this is so worked already, this material. It's time we got these little worms out of here. I think this feeding will go pretty quick. I think 9 days from now, when the system hits 300 days of age, it'll be a perfect time to start moving them out. Because while there's still definitely scraps of stuff throughout the material, it's not much, and I don't want to really run them to a hungry state or anything like that. I'd really like to keep them comfortable and you know, start thinking about getting them moved over into a new space. So either way, let's do this. Instead of like a gulch, we'll just sort of build a little bit of a berm around the outer edge, kind of building it up to create this little pool in the middle. And with the material that we've created on that little berm around the edge, we'll have just enough to leave this entire surface with a nice thin coating. Because I like the idea of burying what we're going to put in here, but also isolating the those other solid objects that we're placing in here, those pieces of almond skin. I'm curious how they're going to do. I figured maybe we put some of the leftovers on here. We'll put some of the leftovers some of the fresh foods onto the other coffee filter. And how should we do this? Coffee we'll share. We'll put that all over the place, really. Blending it in, we'll put some worm chow on it too. But I was thinking, do we put all the not moldy ones in here, or just half? And then maybe giving them half of what's in the moldy container, leaving the rest for the other container? Let's do that. This way both systems will be fed the same way. And from what I've seen, the worms definitely do seem to enjoy moldy stuff. So this won't bother them in the least. In fact, I think they're going to love it. So we put quite a bit in here. Man, I think something that's going to get this moldy is something that the worms are going to be really enjoying as well. But we won't know until we come back in here at some point in the future. I sure hope it is something that they like. So now I've actually covered up the coffee, which I wanted to blend with worm chow, but at this point, whatever. We'll just give it as a top coating now, and that should do. So let's do that covering up idea that I had here to keep it all at a nice consistent level all the way across the bin. And now we won't even have any more top coverings, really. That'll also not create a distraction or, an alternative place for them to go hang out on the surface. They can come up to the surface, but they'll just be still in the castings for the most part, rather than being able to kind of crawl out of the castings, and that'll kind of force them to nibble off all the leftover bits that's still within the material. All right, very nice. Let's start bringing back the coverings here. That last piece of newspaper that was draped out over the top does remain dry, and it's not really there as bedding or anything. It's really there just to keep the light out, keep it nice and dark, so that the worms do feel cozy coming up to the surface. All right, on to bin number 2, the younger one. The younger bin is the one that has my original worms in it, and they're in here. Somehow I had this feeling, even though this bin is younger, this was the bin that seemed to have material that was just so much further along somehow. But somehow it seems like they haven't done quite as much with the top coverings as the other bin did. The other bin just demolished it, although here maybe the top covering was already, or was newer, I think. Maybe the stuff that was in the other bin was it was the stuff that was already quite worked by the time we got to it last week, so we were already putting it out as just scraps anymore. So perhaps we can even supplement the feeding area with this when we get there. So let's set it aside briefly. This too we can keep out here just in case we come up with any leftovers that we want to sort of isolate. But as you can see, even out here on the top surface, the only stuff that I think I might want to try to isolate is just the more dry stuff that sort of had access to the air by not being covered and perhaps getting a little bit drier. Here, I'm not sure we see still quite as many, or maybe there's just as many, they're just not as large. These have all just sort of broken down a little bit further, all these leaf stems, although here and there you do find a large one. So that would be a really nice measure of how far along we are, is whether or not the I don't know, something about this piece right here. I'm going to take it out. Didn't seem like you wanted to even tear. So, geez, sorry. The fact that it stuck to me, maybe it's some sort of tape got onto something. So it's the material itself is not blue per se. It's just sticking to the tape, the clear tape. So it doesn't look like we're going to end up with too many leftovers in here. But let's not speak too soon. Let's actually see how the feeding area is doing and see what we see. Because even though we have bins that are kind of buddied up and kept in sync with each other, sometimes they do deviate from one another. So we might find a thing or two. But sometimes even the bins that you do try your best to keep them in sync end up having, pretty big swings, differences in results or differences in outcomes. So it's really kind of a crapshoot. Somehow it seems like the worms are going to do what the worms are going to do. They kind of have their ways, if you're good at predicting what they've got going on or anticipating it to a certain point at least, or guiding it somehow, if possible, corralling it or steering it somehow, then, you know, you can sometimes make even kind of a fun hobby out of it. While most people treat this, I think, as more of a utility to, you know, have a place to get rid of their household scraps, or perhaps more driven by the desire for the vermicompost that the process produces. Whatever your motivation is, you know. A little bit sticky, I don't know. I just keep kind of getting down to the bottom, and I keep hitting stuff that still feels a little bit kind of perhaps more damp than it needs to be. But it's so full of worms and it all breaks apart so easily. I really don't think there's anything to be worried about in this system. Everything looks so nice. So I think really quick here too, I'm just going to give the whole shebang a quick little stir and aeration. And then we'll set up a feeding area here the way we did in the other bin too, just kind of creating a little divot down the center. And then we'll cover it all up, flatten it all off. Yeah, all right. Kind of like we did in the other one, we use these coffee filters as sort of platforms to drop leftovers on, but here in this bin there just weren't a whole lot of leftovers, so hopefully we got the majority of them. I'm just kind of grabbing, but I'm not sure what there really was. I can't recall. What was that? Nothing really. So yeah, this system's really plowing through the material that's in here, and wanted to make sure we share the coffee. And leftovers were on one coffee filter, and all these almond skins were on the other one. Maybe in this case we'll combine the leftovers with the almond skins, since there's not a whole lot of difference. I do want to kind of keep this stuff together in a single spot in case the worms don't like it. I can just pull it out, you know. Kind of keep it all in one spot so it's not all over the place. But who knows what the worms do? They'll probably end up dragging it out into the material at large. Alright. So yeah, I think 9 days from now should probably be a pretty good interval to come back to these two bins, because what they're getting here now is not a whole lot, you know. And I'm assuming that they're going to be able to eat those almond skins. At least I'm hoping they will. I don't want to be, you know, left with the little chore of having to fish something out that doesn't seem to be to their liking, but, you know, we'll see. You know how it is when you're a worm farmer. It's always kind of a crapshoot. Oh, well, you know, kind of forgot about these little scraps, which probably should have been included as just bedding down in the feeding or something like that. What do we do? I guess we'll just leave them as top cover. The other bin gobbled up all its top cover. This one still had some left over. They might as well be allowed to keep it. And we'll see what happens. It'll probably all be gone by the next time we check in. Alright everyone, that's it for our little check-in here with the red wigglers. And we'll probably be back in here 9 days from now so we could celebrate the other bin's 300th day in service. And I got a feeling setting up their next feeding in such a way that it's, you know, driven with an end goal in mind of the worms being rounded up into one spot for extraction, kind of like a horizontal migration, I think is going to be the way to do it. So that's probably what we're in store for next here. And until then, that's the end of this video. So before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.